Well, it started with a desire to use Kelsey Grammer. I mean, he was always sort of thought to be the guy who had the most, well, I wouldn't say the most potential, but enormous potential. You know, he Kelsey, I think, was only, you know, he started on Cheers at maybe he was 28 or 29, 9 seasons. So he was in his mid to late 30s when Frasier started. You know, theater trained, just a tremendous comic talent, and everyone sort of knew this is a guy that, you know, you could hang a show on, but what's the right idea? The first idea that they came up with was, frankly, a terrible idea. He was going to be like a Malcolm Forbes kind of guy that runs an empire, but I think he was semi-crippled or something, and he was running an empire from his bedroom, and like, in retrospect, an awful idea, because nobody wanted to spin off the Frasier character, but once they sort of went down the road a ways with that bad idea, and everyone realized that was a misfire. They said, well, maybe we should do something with Frasier. And then the challenge became, well, how do you take this outside character and make him a central character? You got to humanize him a little bit. So they added this sort of conflict with his dad, and you know, the dad's a very different. Frasier's a psychiatrist. Dad is this cop with an injury. They might have to live together. But really, I think the stroke of genius was to write a character who was more Frasier than Frasier in the character of Niles, which just, you know, so almost mathematically moved Frasier to the center. And that came about because a casting assistant who had worked for us on Wings came in the development of Frasier and said, you know, because at that time Frasier had a sister character in the early stages, and she said, if you're ever thinking of writing Frasier's brother, this guy is great, and had David Hyde Pierce's, you know, picture, because he had just been on a show called The Powers That Be for Norman Lear. And so the guys started watching tapes of it and said, well, maybe this is the better way to go, and then sort of changed course and wrote him into the show. Anyway, the main challenge was to find a way to make Frasier kind of more vulnerable than he had been on Cheers, where he was sort of a very funny, extreme, eccentric character. Now he had to kind of carry the ball emotionally. So the dad, the brother, starting a new career, you know, all things that made us sort of want to root for him a little bit. I remember hearing from my dad, you know, the Charles brothers who ran, you know, created and ran Cheers, saying, boy, that guy Kelsey Grammer, if there's anybody here that could carry his own show, it's him. But the question is whether he can keep his life together, because he had a lot of kind of, you know, abuse problems and a crazy personal life, all of which he got under control in time. But, you know, the potential was there from the beginning. Everybody felt it.